Hello, and thanks for joining me. Say you've entered a chess tournament. You've been studying chess for years, you have a decent FIDE rating, and you win most of your games at the amateur level. You are so immersed in the game that you've never considered that any other game might be worthwhile, so you're looking forward to the upcoming tournament because it gives you another chance to do what you know and love so well. But then once you sit at the chessboard, strange things begin happening. You're given pieces of paper with numbers on them. You're sitting with 5 opponents instead of 1. You're given only one piece, and you can't tell if it's a king or a pawn because it's shaped like a thimble. The board is colorful, and it has words on the squares, words like Indiana Avenue and Park Place. And most offensive to your sensibilities, there are dice involved in this game of chess. After considering the strangeness for a while, you shrug and begin to play chess. And it's exactly the disaster you think it is. This is roughly the situation we would find ourselves in if evolution were not true. Biologists, biochemists, everyone in the life sciences who base their work on the premise that evolution is true simply couldn't do anything if it wasn't. No hypotheses could be formulated, no experiments designed, no results obtained. Nothing we do in biology would make any kind of sense. If evolution was not true, we would be like the guy who presupposes the rules of chess and sits down at the Monopoly table. But if we assume that evolution is true and find ourselves living in this world, the world in which it is in fact true, then that's like presupposing the rules of chess and sitting down at the chess table. Things work, you can play the game. Even if there are things that we don't quite expect, like the black squares turn out to be green, or the pieces aren't straight Staunton, or the 8-year-old prodigy at the next table is acting like a little shit, your assumptions match the reality in which you find yourself. And that's what's going on here. The life sciences for the last century and a half have been wildly successful precisely because they have been building on Darwin. This is why I generally don't do anti-evolution videos, because I regard them as a waste of time. The only argument against evolution that I will accept at this point in my life will come to me in the form of a citation from a respectable peer-reviewed journal. But I'm making a bit of an exception for this guy, whose name is Derek and whose channel is called Stuff That Matters. I'm responding to a video today called Please Share With Atheists, which, as we'll see, was a huge mistake on his part.
How you guys doing? Derek here, and this is a video for atheists, and I hope that you guys would share it with atheists. So basically there is a group called the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and they have been very successful in convincing institutions and schools to not teach intelligent design. And when authorities stand up to them, they usually sue in court and then they win.
Not as much as I would like. And by no means is the FFRF the only game in town when it comes to judicial advocacy for church-state separation. They weren't even involved in perhaps the most important court case on intelligent design, Kitzmiller v. Dover. That case was brought by the ACLU and by Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Well, actually, it was brought by a group of parents who were upset that the school board, dominated by Christian activists, were requiring the schools to teach their children false information, namely that evolution is not a fact.
The theory of evolution, like the theory of gravity, is a scientific fact. Evolution really happened.
So they've been very successful. Therefore, in our institutions, it is overwhelmingly filled with people who are atheists, because people that are believers are not going to work there. They're not going to fit in there. They might as well go to like a Christian school.
I looked around for sources on what percentage of public school teachers are Christian, and the only source I could find was a Christian website citing a PDK poll which found that 37% of public school teachers are evangelical Christians. And if we assume that half the Christians in the United States are evangelical, that means another 37% are non-evangelical Christians. And if, as other surveys show, the ratio of evangelical to non-evangelical Christians is less than half, then there is more than one non-evangelical for every evangelical, and there are even more public school teachers who are Christian. So it's far from the case that our institutions are overwhelmingly filled with atheists.
And so basically we have an overwhelming viewpoint, one viewpoint, being taught to us through school. Now, we also have the whole idea of evidence against God being taught, but it's actually not. There is no evidence against God.
Evil, suffering, divine hiddenness, biological pleasure and pain, the scale of the universe. I could go on at great length about the evidence against God without mentioning evolution at all. Now, if you think that evolution is contributing to the trend of growing atheism in America, you're probably right, but that is exactly what you would expect if A, God does not exist, and B, our understanding of the universe and how it works increases rather than decreases over time. Evolution by natural selection is not incompatible with theism, but it is surprising if Christianity is true, and unsurprising if naturalism is true, in the sense that if life forms develop, then it would have to develop through natural processes. In that sense, evolution is evidence against theism, although not a full disproof.
In fact, there is so much evidence for him.
Purported evidence?
But the fact is, this evidence for God is not being treated as evidence.
I'm sorry, is our telling the truth about your purported evidence cramping your style?
There is always a way for people to turn something that is evidence of intelligent design into not evidence by redefining what evidence actually is. So, okay, I could show you an apple, and I could teach a intelligent design viewpoint of this apple, or I could teach a evolutionary viewpoint of this apple.
Both of those viewpoints would be wrong. The apple that you buy in your grocery store is neither naturally evolved nor intelligently designed by a deity, but rather a result of artificial selection. This is one of the things that made Ray Comfort the laughingstock of the internet when he claimed that the banana is proof of God. The wild banana, the banana evolved by nature, which you see on the left, is nothing like the domesticated banana you buy in your grocery store. It's the result of humans stepping in, selecting desirable traits that they wanted bananas to have, and breeding for them. Similarly, although wild apples are closer to what we think of as an apple, when I say the word apple, the image that comes into your mind is probably that of a domesticated apple, the result of artificial selection.
But if you are constantly exposed to the evolutionary viewpoint of this apple, it's going to change your worldview.
That's true. It's called learning things. And it's the reason why we have schools in the first place.
And so a lot of Christians are dealing with this, where we go through the education system and we've got this view and all these words and stuff being said to us where we're just like, but everybody thinks this. But it's not that everybody thinks that, it's because our education systems are influenced by this idea. They're being led by this idea that there is no intelligent design. But scientifically, there's intelligent design. Like if we look at science, now it's no coincidence that the the world's famous quantum physicist, I forgot his name.
The number one most famous quantum physicist, you forgot his name? I think my brain just melted a little.
He studied quantum physics for 20 years and then he won the Nobel Prize. And in his speech, he said all he can conclude is that there is an intelligence behind everything, that there is a God, basically. And there is a scientific impossibility that nothing can create life, because in science we see that life creates life.
This number one most famous quantum physicist whose name you can't remember, if he's a quantum physicist, he's probably not also a biologist or a biochemist. Certainly there are biologists and biochemists who believe in intelligent design. It's possible that some of them have even won the Nobel Prize. But if they had won the Nobel for demonstrating the existence of God, I'm pretty sure I would have heard about it.
But the fact is, we can have very intelligent, very intellectual people in the education system. Very impressive, genius maybe. They still have taken an emotional choice to teach a certain way and to think of the world in a certain way. You can have an emotional choice to believe in God, and that's going to lead you this way. That's going to lead you to all of the ways of thinking about life and everything in this way. You might even become like Aristotle or some of the great world thinkers that believed in God. When Aristotle said, "All that I know is that I know nothing."
That was Socrates. Socrates said that quote. And the quote is, "If I am the wisest man, it is because I alone know that I know nothing." And here in retaliation is a quote from Asimov. This particular thesis, referring to Socrates' quote, was addressed to me a quarter of a century ago by John Campbell, who specialized in irritating me. He also told me that all theories are proved wrong in time. My answer to him was, John, when people thought the earth was flat, they were wrong. When people thought the earth was spherical, they were wrong. But if you think that thinking the earth is spherical is just as wrong as thinking the earth is flat, then your view is wronger than both of them put together. Likewise, it would be a mistake to say that when it comes to the domesticated apple, natural selection and intelligent design by a deity are equally wrong. They're not.
And yet the atheistic group tries to pretend that all of the great famous world thinkers are atheists, but in fact they're not.
I don't know any atheist group of any size or reputation that argues that all of the great famous world thinkers were atheists. Not one. You know, it was kind of a tactical mistake on your part to encourage your viewers to share this with atheists, because when we see someone who believes that not bearing false witness is 1/10 of the most important moral code in the history of humanity, and then we see that someone bearing false witness, it tends to make that person less credible in our eyes, not more.
And the atheists have even said sometimes, like Albert Einstein, he's like, stop quoting me as an atheist, I'm not an atheist.
True, Einstein was probably a deist, a believer in a creator god. He was not religious.
Even Darwin never said he was an atheist.
Also true, Darwin identified as an agnostic, which, unless he was a theist agnostic, would make him atheist, even if he never called himself one. He abandoned his Christianity at the age of 40.
And so it's basically what it is, what we don't understand. It's not called a religion, this way of thinking. It's not called faith, but it is faith. You're believing something that you have not seen. You have not seen evolution.
I'm confused. Is believing in something which you can't see supposed to be a virtue or a sin?
You have not seen that there is no God.
I'm sorry, are atheists the ones who've defined God as invisible? Is that our fault?
And so you're believing that there is not God. I've not seen God, but I believe in God, and I choose to believe God.
Okay, try something for me. Right now, as you're sitting there watching this video, try to choose to believe that London is the capital of France. Can't do it, can you? You can act like it is. You can devise thought experiments and play games in your mind revolving around London being the capital of France, but you can't actually believe that it is true simply by choosing to. This is called Doxastic Involuntarism, and it's something I talk about a lot on this channel.
Because I choose the yes in life. There's a yes in life and there's a no in life. The yes in life is that we're here for a reason and that there's a God. That means that everything is happening, like even the next word out of my mouth matters.
He doesn't say what the no in life is supposed to be, but if it's the negation of the yes in life, then it's saying that it's not the case that everything matters. In other words, there's at least one thing that doesn't matter. I don't think that's particularly controversial, do you?
That's right, the points are like 90% of your mail. That's right, the points are like a fully loaded, top of the line Yugo. That's right, the points are like if NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys traded guys.
Okay, that's how much everything matters. That's what I choose to believe. I have faith in that. Okay, so if you believe in your instructors who said that the blah, 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 did research about this and that, and you're believing them because you're still not seeing evidence of evolution, but you're believing it.
There's an article I've linked to before called 29 Plus Evidences for Macroevolution, written by Douglas Theobald, PhD. Before you ask, the PhD is in biochemistry. It's exactly what it sounds like. Professor Theobald explains exactly why it is we know evolution happened. This isn't something that most scientists bother to do, for the same reason historians don't bother writing articles and books about how we know the Roman Empire existed. The evidence is ubiquitous, and not in any kind of serious dispute.
I'm seeing evidence of creation, and I'm believing it, because this is what I call evidence of creation.
I'm curious as to why you would think the lack of rabbit fossils in the Precambrian strata is evidence of creation.
This is what you call evidence of evolution. But you happen to have the support, you happen to have the overwhelming majority of thinkers and people in the education system who have been influenced by mainly this group that I mentioned earlier.
You mean the Freedom from Religion Foundation? I would say they're fairly influential in the atheist community, but it's simply not true to say that they have influenced the overwhelming majority of thinkers and people in the education system. What kind of weird superpower do you think Dan Barker has anyway? You think his music is that good?
And so what I want to get down to is that this is a choice of the heart that humans have to make.
You frame it as a choice of the heart, Because if you frame it as a choice of the mind, then people are a lot less likely to make the choice that you want them to make. This is what Kirk Cameron talks about when he tells apologists to circumnavigate the intellect and appeal directly to the conscience. Problem is, it is a choice of the mind, because whether or not God exists is a fact about the world. It's a fact about objective reality, and the intellect is, whether you like it or not, the proper place to decide such questions.
I went through all that. I went through the education system. I went through a lot of pain. I went through negative experiences.
Unless you live in a movie and all your teachers were played by Christian actors with sinister goatees, I don't think your negative experiences had anything to do with your faith. I was openly Christian at the time I went to public school, and I didn't suffer any bad consequences as a result of my faith. And I learned much later, that at least 2 of my teachers were atheists. I did have one friend who was also a Christian, who once talked to me about how accommodating the school was to his faith and his ability to practice it. A couple months later, he went to a new church, an evangelistic church, and shortly after that he started talking to me about how oppressive the school was to his faith and his ability to practice it. The funny thing is, this new church didn't have its own building. They actually rented the school auditorium for use on Sunday mornings. So he actually went to church in our school and learned from the evangelicals there how oppressive the school was to faith. Even at the time, I could see it was bullshit.
And I chose still to believe in God and to believe in Jesus because I was making that choice first, and then I chose to seek the information and to seek the arguments and to seek everything, the way of thinking that aligned with that emotional decision.
And you think because you went that route, deciding to believe first and seeking out the arguments to support it afterward, that must be how everyone does it? I mean, at least you're honest that that's the way you went, but it does mean that when you say this,
you can choose the other way, and you can choose to say, okay, I need proof, even though I don't have proof of evolution, but I believe in that.
You have no credibility. By your own admission, you're seeking out the arguments to support your conclusion, and it doesn't take much effort to infer that you're actively avoiding arguments that fail to support your conclusion. But again, just because you did it that way doesn't mean that everyone does it that way. I didn't choose to be an atheist. I was dragged into it kicking and screaming, so to speak. And my own opinion is that nobody chooses these things at all, which makes me something close to what William Rowe called a friendly atheist. Someone who does not believe that God exists, but believes that a person can nonetheless be rationally justified in believing in God. I am very skeptical about whether any such rational warrant exists, but I do believe that theists are at least pragmatically justified in being theists, for the simple reason that they can't help it. They can't choose to not believe that God exists, any more than they can choose to not believe that London is the capital of England. They can educate themselves, and they can take a real and fair look at the arguments for atheism, and I really wish they would, because in the process of doing that, they may find that their mind changes itself, which is what happened to me. But they can't simply turn a switch in their mind and change what they believe.
I don't have proof that there's no God, but I have faith that he's not there. You're choosing an emotional way.
Didn't you just get done saying that the choice is emotional either way?
We have the choice every day when we look at a tree. Are we going to see it as through the idea that God exists, or are we going to see it through the idea that he doesn't? So that's the thing. And we can choose to see it either way.
So choose to be an atheist. Go ahead right now, choose to be an atheist, just for like 30 seconds, just to see if you're capable of doing it. Because I know you're not.
And so we're constantly making this choice. This is our battle. Now, Jesus said that...
And he lapses into Bible speak for a moment, so we'll skip ahead to this.
This choice to be an atheist is a choice that you're making. And I want you to know that you have been exposed to a lot more atheistic viewpoints than you have intelligent design viewpoints.
That may be close to being true today, but as of the year when I became an atheist, it was very far from being the truth. I had my church, I had my Christian education, I was attending a Christian college, I was exposed to a lot more pro-Christian views than pro-atheist views. Even at the moment that I became an atheist, the number of atheist views that I had been exposed to could probably be counted on my fingers, whereas I had been exposed to hundreds of Christian views.
And what I also want to tell you is that, you know, a lot of people say, oh, there's not enough evidence of Jesus. What if he even doesn't exist? So the very fact that there are, I think maybe at least 17 historical accounts written by even atheists about Jesus tells us that he exists.
I'm not an expert in this subject. Next time I have something like this, I may try to get Godless Engineer or someone on board. But I did go to Wikipedia's list of sources for the historical Jesus, and even counting all non-Christians as atheists, and even including disputed sources such as Epictetus and the Testimony of Flavium, I was unable to reach the number 17. I'm pretty sure that you or another apologist pulled that number out of your ass. At best, it's like how when anti-communists say that 1 billion people have been killed by communism, they're counting the tens of millions of Soviets who died resisting Hitler in World War II. It's deciding on the conclusion you want, and then finding or fudging or inventing data to support it. Which, to be fair, is pretty much what you told us you're doing. By the way, I was just using communism as an example there. I'm not actually a communist myself. That you know of.
Now, it also tells us that he is God. Because if a human, think about it, if a human tells you that they're God, it's so easy for a human to make a mistake. Even fumbling in their speech would give it away that they're not God.
Is it possible for a human to live into their 30s and never once make a mistake in speech in front of others? If no, then it's pretty much impossible to argue that Jesus was ever fully human. If yes, then it's pretty much impossible to argue that not stumbling in your speech ever is a sign of godhood.
And so if someone is able to say that they're God and live until they are crucified, until they are 35 years old, and have crowds follow them, that's the only way that he would be in those history books, is if he actually did become that famous and have crowds following him from city to city, and people traveling miles to see him.
You've obviously never been to a Rush concert.
And him being written in historical records through of his execution, his crucifixion, the only way that he could get to that point is if he was actually God, because people would find out very quickly if he wasn't, and crowds would not follow him unless there were miracles being happening. Is there any human on earth who can claim to be God and last a day?
First, it doesn't take much effort to convince people that miracles are happening if they aren't, especially in a time and place in world history where skepticism wasn't really a thing. Second, it takes even less effort to write about someone who may or may not have existed, who may or may not have had a ministry, who may or may not have had huge crowds following him, who may or may not have claimed to perform miracles, and who may or may not have claimed to be God. Anyone can write about such things. No divine inspiration or intervention is required for that. And if you look at the order in which the Gospels were written, with Mark, the most straightforward Gospel, being written first, and John, the most, for want of a better word, fucked in the head Gospel, being written decades later, the progression that happens there, with events becoming more fantastical over time, is exactly what you'd expect if the story of Jesus was a legend, possibly but not necessarily based on the nucleus of an actual person, who possibly but not necessarily did some of the things attributed to him in the legend. The rest of the video is repetition along the same theme, and it ends with this.
Okay, so I hope this was a good message for you guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you want to share it with atheists. I'm not God, so I made some mistakes in this video, I think, but overlook that. Okay, thank you guys. Bye.
Overlook your mistakes? Why should we overlook your mistakes? Forgive them? Yeah, sure, because you're only human and humans make mistakes. But overlook them? If my math teacher tells me that 1 + 1 = 3, even if it's an honest mistake, and we assume he's a math teacher because he was politically appointed or something, is that something we're supposed to overlook? No. When someone makes a mistake about a matter of factual truth, we should not overlook that mistake. We should observe it. We should pay attention to the mistake. We should underlook it. Not to bring shame on the person who made the mistake, but to be aware of what the actual truth is, and to remind ourselves as a community that it's important to try to not make mistakes. Because the fact is, even if you do think you select what is true and what is not, the mistakes you made here were avoidable. By the way, in the description, Derek said he turned off comments in the video because people were being mean. In my experience with evangelicals who turn off and delete their comments, being mean and disrespectful requires nothing more than simply disagreeing with the evangelical. So apparently, we should not have controverted his controversial video. He also calls us ironic because if God doesn't exist, then nothing we say matters, so why eat or drink or comment or do anything at all? First of all, fuck you forever for encouraging self-harm, even as a joke. Second, if you believe that you can kill and rape and steal your entire life and still by definition be a good person simply by having the right religion, then morally, nothing matters to you. So if you want your choices to matter, Derek, choose to be an atheist. Which, in your view, you can. But in my view, all I can ask is that you educate yourself about the things you talk about because, to reiterate, asking people to share your video with atheists was your biggest mistake. We know better. If you enjoyed this video and want to help my channel grow, please hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. Be sure to hit the bell to be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to share the comment that you would leave on Derek's video if he had not turned off the comments, or if you happen to remember the name of any #1 world-famous quantum physicists, leave a comment below. A huge thanks to my Patreon supporters, you help make this channel possible. If you'd like to become a supporter, check out the link in the description. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. I'm David John Wellman, and the rest is up to you.